Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
Leona Kinsey was last seen at her home on Hall Street in La Grande, Oregon, on October 25, 1999. At the time, she was 45 years old, with brown eyes and shoulder-length brown hair. Known for her vibrant and independent personality, Leona ran her own landscaping and yard care business. Her disappearance, though, would set off a complex and haunting search that spanned over 2 decades, with few answers and many mysteries. Leona had a deep love for the outdoors, enjoying activities like hunting, fishing, and camping. She also had a strong sense of compassion, and her friends and family describe her as a firecracker with a big heart. She was a member of the Puebla and Yakima tribes in Washington state, and her tattoo of a tomahawk and a peace pipe on her bicep was one of the ways she expressed her pride in her heritage. Leona had a daughter, Carolyn DeFord, who would later dedicate herself to advocating for missing and murdered Indigenous women. Carolyn's work in this field is powerful, having driven significant change in Washington state, where efforts to address these issues have expanded, including the introduction of an alert system for missing Indigenous persons. Carolyn's efforts have ensured that Leona's case remains in the public eye, a case that otherwise might have been forgotten, buried in the systemic neglect of Indigenous women's disappearances. The last time Leona was seen, she was grocery shopping at Walmart in La Grande on October 25th. She bumped into her best friend, Nancy, and shared that she planned to stop by her place after visiting Albertson's grocery store, where she would be meeting a man named John. This was a man who, according to family and friends, may have been involved in her disappearance. Leona had struggled with addiction in the past, and it's believed that John was involved in some way with drugs, possibly even being a drug dealer. After the encounter with Nancy, Leona failed to show up at her friend's house, and Nancy began to worry. The next day, on October 26th, Carolyn, who was living in Washington state at the time, woke up feeling uneasy, as if something was wrong. She described the feeling as an overwhelming sorrow, something she couldn't place, but which felt deeper than usual. When Carolyn arrived at work, she found a message from Nancy saying that Leona had not shown up as promised, and now she was concerned. Carolyn tried calling her mother, but there was no answer. She paged her, hoping this would prompt a response, but still there was silence. The mother-daughter bond that was usually so reliable now felt distant and strained. By October 27th, Nancy and Lonnie, Leona's ex-boyfriend, decided to check on her at her home. They found that Leona's pets, her cherished dogs and cats, had not been fed or cared for, a huge red flag given how much Leona loved and took care of her animals. In the absence of any sign of Leona, the police were called. They entered her home through a window, but found no immediate signs of foul play. Everything appeared to be in its place, except for the absence of the woman herself. It wasn't until October 29th, for days after Leona's disappearance, that a crucial clue was discovered. Leona's light brown 1980s GMC Jimmy was found abandoned in the parking lot of Albertsons. Nancy, who had been searching for her friend, was the one to locate the car. It appeared that the vehicle hadn't been there when the store had closed the night before, as the manager stated. There was no immediate evidence of a struggle inside or around the car, but the car was caked in mud, suggesting it had been driven off-road. Inside, a box of rubber gloves was found behind the seat, but there were no clues that led to Leona's whereabouts. In the days that followed, the case began to grow colder. Leona's daughter, Carolyn, filed a missing person report on October 29th, after holding off for several days. She had been reluctant to involve the police, fearing that it might only be a temporary disappearance related to her mother's past struggles with addiction. Carolyn thought that once she called the police, they would act quickly, as they were trained to do, but that was not the case. Despite her deep concern, she was met with a slow and disheartening response. By November 3rd, Carolyn had traveled to La Grande to take care of her mother's rental property. The landlord needed either the rent or for Leona's belongings to be packed up. When Carolyn arrived at her mother's trailer, she found that the coffee pot still had coffee in it, and groceries were left out, now rotting on the counter. Leona's purse was found with her pager, keys, glasses, and cigarettes inside. Carolyn knew that her mother wouldn't have gone anywhere without these items, a realization that only deepened her fear. To make matters more disturbing, she also found several notes written by her mother asking her ex-boyfriend to leave her alone. While it seemed as if Leona might have just disappeared without a trace, the truth began to set in that something far worse had occurred. The police were slow to respond, and many of Leona's loved ones believed that her past struggles with addiction led authorities to dismiss her case. However, for those who knew her best, it was clear that Leona wouldn't just abandon her pets or her life so suddenly. Something was wrong, and it was more than just another disappearance. Over the years, the case continued to languish, with no progress and little to no coverage from the media. The only significant leads came from the family's own investigation, which focused on John, the man Leona had been meeting at Albertsons. His full name was Juan John Painalamas, and he had a criminal history that included assault, rape, and potential connections to a Mexican drug cartel. He was eventually deported to Mexico in 2006, but his whereabouts and current status remain unknown. Despite the fact that John is a prime person of interest, the police have not been able to gather enough evidence to confirm his involvement. Leona's case gained new attention in the following years, largely due to the tireless efforts of Carolyn, who began to speak out more about her mother's disappearance. She began to hold memorials for Leona and, later, rallies for missing and murdered Indigenous women, a cause that she was deeply passionate about. In 2008, after years of hoping for answers, Carolyn and her family gathered in La Grande to remember Leona and to remind the community that there were still people out there who knew something about what happened to her. Carolyn said, "I'm willing to bet there are people in La Grande who have information that could help bring closure. We're ready for closure. It's been 9 years, and that's too long to constantly wonder what's happened." The case, however, remains open. Police have stated that they've conducted many interviews, but there have been no significant breakthroughs. Despite this, the community's silence continues to weigh on Carolyn, who feels that if Leona had been a different person, someone more prominent or less marginalized, her case might have been treated differently. In December of 2008, Carolyn remarked, "I'm ready to find answers. She deserves to be brought home. She deserves to rest in peace. I would like someone to be held accountable, but I'll just start with finding her." The years have passed, and still, Leona Kinsey's case remains unsolved. In 2021, Leona's ex-boyfriend, Lonnie, took a polygraph test to clear his name, but the police have yet to rule anyone out. The mystery surrounding Leona's disappearance persists, with rumors suggesting that she may have been murdered and her body hidden in one of the many mountains surrounding La Grande. These rumors, though, have not been substantiated, and the search for Leona continues. If you have any information regarding her disappearance, please contact the La Grande Police Department at 541-963-1017. Her family, especially her daughter Carolyn, continues to fight for answers, and the hope is that someone, somewhere, will come forward with the crucial information that could finally bring Leona home. The disappearance of Peter Shankosi, known as Shawn, remains a haunting mystery that has left his family and investigators grappling with unanswered questions for over a decade. Shawn, a 24-year-old from McMinnville, Oregon, vanished on September 30th, 2012, under circumstances that defy easy explanation. His case is a labyrinth of conflicting narratives, strange coincidences, and a lack of concrete evidence, leaving those who knew him and those who have followed his story searching for closure. Shawn was last seen at his cousin Kristen's home in the 15500 block of Northwest Orchard View Road, a remote location nestled within the Miller Woods area of McMinnville. The property, part of a nature preserve known as the Flying M Ranch, was isolated with no phone or internet service and only a single gravel road leading in and out. Shawn had been staying with Kristen, her boyfriend Kyle, and a roommate named Linda for a few days while his mother was away. The arrangement was meant to provide Shawn with a temporary respite from his struggles with epilepsy and drug use, as well as to ease the burden on his family, who had been his primary caregivers. On the night of his disappearance, Shawn was reportedly watching the movie Alice in Wonderland in the living room while the others went to bed around 10 o'clock p.m. An hour later, Linda got up for a glass of water and noticed Shawn was gone. By the next morning, when Shawn had still not returned, a search was launched. Despite extensive efforts involving search and rescue teams, ATVs, horses, dogs, and even heat-seeking helicopters, no trace of Shawn was found. He had left behind all his belongings, including his wallet, money, cigarettes, and medication, items that would seem essential for someone planning to leave voluntarily. The case took a strange turn in April 2015, when a hunter discovered Shawn's sandals at the edge of a ravine on an adjacent property, less than a mile from Kristen's home. The sandals were found in two separate locations, with the first discovered just a week after Shawn's disappearance during a search organized by Kristen herself. The second sandal, found 3 years later, showed little sign of wear, raising questions about how it could have remained in such good condition after years of exposure to the elements. These discoveries only deepened the mystery, as they did not align with the narrative that Shawn had wandered off into the wilderness. Shawn's life leading up to his disappearance was marked by significant challenges. He suffered from severe epilepsy, which had left him classified as disabled. His condition was so debilitating that he required constant supervision and could not drive or live independently. Despite his physical limitations, Shawn was described as a kind, trusting, and outgoing individual who loved rugby and video games. However, his struggles with epilepsy and the side effects of his medications took a toll on his mental health, and he often felt like a burden to his family. In the years before his disappearance, Shawn had also fallen into drug use, primarily marijuana and occasionally heroin, which further complicated his life. The circumstances surrounding Shawn's disappearance have led to numerous theories, but none have provided definitive answers. One line of inquiry has focused on Kristen, Kyle, and Linda, the three individuals who were with Shawn in the days leading up to his disappearance. Their accounts of what happened that weekend were remarkably consistent, almost to the point of being rehearsed, which raised suspicions among investigators. Kristen, in particular, exhibited odd behavior in the aftermath of Shawn's disappearance, including referring to him in the past tense and making cryptic comments about him falling down a rabbit hole, a reference to the movie Alice in Wonderland that Shawn had been watching. Kristen's actions in the days following Shawn's disappearance also raised red flags. She called in Shawn's Valium prescription days after he went missing, a move that seemed inexplicable given the circumstances. Additionally, she refused to take a lie detector test, hired a lawyer, and obstructed the investigation by withholding information, including GPS data from her vehicles and phone records. Her reluctance to cooperate with authorities only fueled speculation about her involvement in Shawn's disappearance. Despite these suspicions, no concrete evidence has been found to implicate Kristen, Kyle, or Linda in Shawn's disappearance. The lack of forensic evidence, combined with the remote location of the Flying M Ranch, has made it difficult for investigators to piece together what happened. The case has been further complicated by the fact that Shawn's epilepsy and drug use made him vulnerable, leading some to speculate that he may have wandered off and succumbed to the elements. However, the discovery of his sandals in two separate locations, along with the absence of any other signs of him, makes this theory difficult to reconcile. Over the years, Shawn's family has worked tirelessly to keep his case in the public eye. They have set up a Facebook page dedicated to finding him and have collaborated with private investigators and law enforcement to pursue new leads. Despite their efforts, the case remains unsolved, and the family is left with more questions than answers. In the end, Shawn's story is one of resilience, love, and the enduring bond of family. Despite the challenges he faced in life, he was deeply loved by those who knew him, and his memory continues to inspire those who seek justice on his behalf. Until the truth is uncovered, Shawn's disappearance will remain a haunting mystery. Casey and Perry, a young fifth grader from Portland, Oregon, vanished on the night of September 14, 1990, after a heated argument with her father. Her disappearance has left an enduring mark on her family, and despite years of investigation, the case remains unsolved. The chilling events surrounding Casey's disappearance have led to numerous theories and a controversial confession, but the truth of what happened that night remains elusive. On the evening of September 14, 1990, Casey was visiting her father's residence in Southeast Portland, Oregon, at the 2200 block of Southeast 37th Avenue. Casey's parents, who had never married, had an increasingly strained relationship. Casey's father, troubled by what he considered the poor conditions in her mother's home, had expressed a desire for Casey to move in with him and his wife. The disagreement between father and daughter escalated that evening, culminating in Casey running away from her father's house. It was approximately 11 p.m. when Casey left. She took with her some extra clothes, which she had hidden in her purse. In her emotional state, she may have been planning to return to her mother's residence in Kaiser, Oregon, located about 80 miles to the south. But after leaving her father's house, Casey never made it back to her mother's home, and her disappearance would soon raise troubling questions. After she left her father's home, Casey was seen at Keenow's food store, located in the 2400 block of Southeast 39th Avenue, about 10 blocks from where she had been living. She was carrying her purse, which was believed to contain a bright pink blouse with large black buttons. She had no known destination at that time, and the sighting of her at the store would be the last confirmed trace of Casey. Hours passed without word from Casey, and her family began to worry. They quickly realized something was seriously wrong when she failed to return home. Her purse and the clothing she had taken with her were later discovered abandoned near the store, but there was no sign of Casey. This left authorities with few clues and only growing anxiety as the days passed without any leads. In the days following her disappearance, there were several unconfirmed reports of Casey's whereabouts. Some witnesses claimed to have seen her hitchhiking in Albany, Oregon, several days after she vanished, while others said she was spotted at the intersection of Interstate 5 and Interstate 205 near Wilsonville, Oregon. However, these sightings could never be substantiated, and they added to the confusion surrounding her disappearance. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the theory that Casey had attempted to travel back to her mother's home in Kaiser persisted. The possibility that she may have been trying to return home, either on foot or by hitchhiking, became one of the leading hypotheses in the investigation. Yet, with no further confirmed sightings and no substantial evidence of her movements, Casey's fate remained unclear. In August 1991, more than a year after Casey's disappearance, the case took an unexpected turn. Brian Keith George, a former boyfriend of Casey's mother, came forward and confessed to Casey's murder. At the time of his confession, George was in police custody in Portland, charged with bank robbery. He claimed to have concealed Casey's body sometime after her disappearance, stating that he had buried her remains in a wooded area outside of Kelso, Washington, his hometown. His confession sent shockwaves through the investigation, as George had remained close to Casey and her siblings even after his relationship with her mother ended. The confession seemed plausible given George's history with the family, and investigators began to search the area he had mentioned. However, when the searchers combed the wooded region near Kelso, they discovered only animal bones, not the remains of Casey. George's confession appeared to fall apart. Just a few months after he had admitted to the crime, he recanted, claiming that he had fabricated the entire account. This left investigators with even more questions than before. Was he lying all along, or did he know something that could solve the mystery of Casey's disappearance? Brian Keith George's involvement in the case remained a point of contention. Before his confession, George had been considered a person of interest in Casey's disappearance, and his actions following the event only added to the suspicion surrounding him. He had participated in the initial search for Casey, offering to help in locating the missing girl, but this raised red flags for investigators. Why would someone involved in a crime volunteer to search for the victim? George's criminal history also made him a key figure in the investigation. In addition to his involvement in the 1991 bank robbery, George had a prior conviction for manslaughter. He had served 9 years in prison for the crime, which added further complexity to his character. Despite his criminal past, there was no direct evidence linking George to Casey's disappearance, and he was never formally charged with any crime related to the case. In media interviews, George also pointed the finger at Casey's father, claiming that he believed Casey's father was responsible for her disappearance. However, this claim lacked evidence, and there was no substantiation for his allegations. Investigators did not find any compelling reasons to suspect Casey's father, and the theory that he may have been involved in her disappearance was never seriously pursued. Despite George's controversial confession and recantation, the mystery of Casey and Perry's disappearance remains unsolved. Her case is marked by uncertainty and conflicting accounts, and after more than 3 decades, her whereabouts are still unknown. Her family has never stopped seeking answers, holding out hope that one day the truth will emerge. However, the case has become increasingly cold, with no new developments in recent years. Casey's parents, both of whom were at odds during the time of her disappearance, still wonder what happened to their daughter. While some believe she ran away on her own, others suspect foul play, and the truth may never be fully known. At the time of her disappearance, Casey was just 11 years old and in the 5th grade. Her young life was tragically cut short, and the mystery surrounding her fate continues to haunt her loved ones. Casey's story remains an unsolved case in the eyes of the authorities, but her family continues to seek justice and closure. If you have any information regarding Casey and Perry's disappearance, please contact the Portland Police Bureau or your local authorities. Today, we're diving into the haunting case of Iron Meyer, a 29-year-old woman who vanished in 1979 while on a cross-country road trip. Her disappearance remains one of the most baffling and tragic mysteries of the Pacific Northwest. This is the story of Iron, her journey, and the unanswered questions that still linger over 4 decades later. Iron Meyer was a 29-year-old woman from St. Louis, Missouri. She had been working as a waitress and, by all accounts, was living a relatively ordinary life. However, in 1979, Iron decided to make a dramatic change. She packed up her belongings, took her cat, and set out on a cross-country road trip. Her goal was to explore the West Coast, visit family and friends, and perhaps start a new chapter in her life. Iron's journey took her through several states, and by late July 1979, she found herself in southern Oregon, near the coast. She decided to camp at Harris Beach, a scenic area just north of Brookings, Oregon. Iron paid for a few days at the campground, suggesting she planned to stay for a short while. On July 20th, 1979, Iron left her campsite at Harris Beach and drove into Brookings to visit a local market. She purchased groceries and cat food, planning to return to her campsite shortly. Iron left her cat behind in her tent, which was unusual for her, as she was known to be very attached to her pet. This detail suggests she intended to make a quick trip and return promptly. However, Iron never made it back to her campsite. Her cat was later found in the tent, hungry but alive, indicating Iron had been gone longer than expected. The groceries she purchased were still in her car, further suggesting she never returned to her campsite after leaving the store. On July 29, 1979, Iron's car, a green AMC Gremlin hatchback, was discovered in the parking lot of Whalehead Beach State Park, about 5 miles north of Harris Beach. The car had been there for several days before anyone reported it. The groceries Iron had bought were still inside, untouched. This raised immediate red flags, as it appeared Iron had not returned to her campsite after her trip to the store. The location of the car was puzzling. If Iron had planned to return to her campsite, why was her car found north of Harris Beach? This discrepancy led investigators to believe foul play was involved. Someone likely took control of Iron and her car, driving it to Whalehead Beach before abandoning it. Several theories have emerged over the years about what happened to Iron Meyer. The most widely accepted theory is that Iron was abducted by someone she encountered in Brookings. She may have been lured or forced into a situation where she lost control of her car. Her car being found miles away from her campsite suggests someone drove it there after harming her. Some have speculated that Iron may have accidentally fallen into the ocean or off a cliff. However, this theory is less likely, as there is no evidence she returned to her campsite or ventured to a dangerous area near the coast. Additionally, her car being moved makes this scenario improbable. While some have suggested Iron may have chosen to disappear and start a new life, this theory is unlikely. She left behind her cat, groceries, and other personal belongings, which she would not have done if she planned to vanish intentionally. The Oregon coast, while beautiful, has a history of strange and tragic events. The area around Brookings, in particular, has been the site of several disappearances and unsolved crimes. The remote, rugged terrain and dense forests provide ample opportunities for someone to hide evidence of crime. It's possible Iron's remains are hidden somewhere in the hills or forests near Brookings, never to be found. When Iron's car was discovered, several items were missing, including her keyring with a distinctive Boss keychain and her Vivitar camera. These items have never been found. The camera, in particular, could have provided crucial clues if it had been recovered. Investigators hoped the photos on the camera might reveal what happened to Iron, but without it, the case remains shrouded in mystery. Some have drawn parallels between Iron's disappearance and another case from the same year, the disappearance of Elaine Marie Robertson. On May 27, 1979, Elaine, a woman from San Luis Obispo, California, was camping in Washington when she vanished under mysterious circumstances. Like Iron, Elaine was traveling with her pet and had her vehicle found abandoned not far from her last known location. While the two cases share some similarities, both women were traveling alone, both had pets, and both vanished near the Pacific Northwest coast. There is no concrete evidence linking the two. However, the proximity in time and location has led some to speculate that a serial predator may have been active in the region during that period. The investigation into Iron's disappearance faced several challenges. By the time her car was found, crucial evidence may have been lost or contaminated. Additionally, the remote nature of the Oregon coast made it difficult to conduct thorough searches. Over the years, the case grew cold, and with no new leads, Iron's fate remains unknown. The disappearance of Iron Meyer is a tragic and enduring mystery. While foul play is the most likely explanation for her disappearance, the truth remains elusive. If you have any information about Iron Meyer's disappearance, please contact the Brookings Police Department or your local authorities. The disappearance of Rebecca Reed, a 37-year-old mother and store manager from Eugene, Oregon, remains one of the most haunting unsolved cases in the state. On January 27, 1997, Reed was abducted from the grocery cart convenience store on Oregon Highway 99, where she was working the late-night shift. The case has baffled investigators for over 2 decades, leaving her family and the community desperate for answers. Rebecca Reed, known to her friends and family as Becky, was a dedicated employee at the grocery cart. On the night of her disappearance, she was scheduled to work until 1:30 a.m. The store was quiet, as it often was during late hours, and Becky was preparing to close up for the night. However, just before closing time, a bystander collecting beer bottles outside the store witnessed a chilling scene. The witness reported seeing an unidentified white man forcibly leading Becky out of the store. The man appeared to be in his late 20s to mid-30s, standing approximately 5 feet 9 inches and weighing between 165 and 185 pounds. He had shoulder-length brown hair, a mustache, and facial stubble. He was wearing a dark-colored baseball cap, a short-sleeved white shirt, and jeans. The witness described the man as holding Becky by the arm and moving quickly, shoving her into the passenger side of his vehicle before speeding away. The vehicle was described as an early 1970s to early 1980s compact or mid-size pickup truck, white or light-colored, with a horizontal blue stripe approximately 8 inches wide running the length of the driver's side. The truck may have had a white canopy covering the bed, and it did not have an extended cab or slider. The front seat appeared to be at even height with the bottom of the rear window, suggesting it had a bench seat. The witness immediately called the police, but by the time officers arrived, Becky and her abductor were gone. Inside the store, investigators found that money was missing from the register, leading them to believe that the abduction was connected to a robbery. However, the fact that Becky was taken along with the stolen cash raised alarming questions. Why would a robber abduct the store clerk? Was Becky targeted specifically, or was her abduction a spur-of-the-moment decision? #Hashtag Becky's life and background. Becky was a beloved member of her community. She was married to her husband, Daryl Reed, and the couple had a teenage son. Becky was known for her bubbly and outgoing personality, always laughing and smiling. She was a graduate of Thurston High School and had worked at the grocery cart for several years. Her family described her as a devoted mother and wife who loved her job and took pride in her work. In the days following her disappearance, Becky's family and friends were devastated. Daryl Reed spoke to the media, pleading for information about his wife's whereabouts. He expressed hope that Becky might still be alive, suggesting that her abductor could be holding her for ransom. However, no ransom demands were ever made, and no further contact was made with Becky or her family. The Eugene Police Department launched an extensive investigation into Becky's disappearance. A composite sketch of a suspect was released to the public, and the description of the truck was widely circulated. Investigators followed up on hundreds of leads, but none provided any concrete information about Becky's whereabouts or the identity of her abductor. 1 month after Becky's abduction, a similar incident occurred at a nearby grocery store. A man attempted to abduct a female cashier at knife point, but the woman managed to escape. The suspect in that case, John Dunn, was arrested and convicted. Investigators explored the possibility that Dunn might have been involved in Becky's abduction, but they were unable to establish a connection. Dunn was later killed in a confrontation with police in 2007, taking any potential information about Becky's case to the grave. Over the years, the case grew cold. Despite numerous tips and leads, investigators were unable to locate Becky or identify her abductor. In 2007, on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, Detective Tracy Belshey revealed that more than 1,500 leads had been investigated, but none had led to a breakthrough. The case remains open, but with no new information, progress has stalled. Several theories have emerged over the years about what might have happened to Becky Reed. Some believe that her abduction was a random act of violence, possibly connected to the robbery at the store. Others speculate that Becky may have been targeted specifically, either by someone she knew or by a stranger who had been watching her. The fact that Becky's coat was left behind in the store has led some to believe that her abduction was not premeditated. If the suspect had planned to take her, he might have ensured she was dressed for the cold January night. Instead, it appears that Becky was taken abruptly, possibly as an afterthought during the robbery. Another theory is that Becky's abductor may have been someone familiar with the area or the store. The grocery cart was located on a busy highway, and the suspect's truck was described in detail by the witness. Despite this, no one has come forward with information about the vehicle or its owner. Becky's disappearance has had a profound impact on her family. Her sister, Chris Yoder, has been vocal about her frustration with the lack of progress in the case. In a 2017 interview, Chris expressed her disappointment with law enforcement, stating that she felt the case had been neglected. She described Becky as a loving mother and sister who deserved justice. Becky's son, who was just a teenager at the time of her disappearance, has grown up without his mother. The family has never given up hope that Becky might still be found, but as the years pass, the likelihood of a resolution grows increasingly slim. Despite the passage of time, Becky's case remains active. The Eugene Police Department continues to encourage anyone with information about her disappearance to come forward. In 2017, Detective Belshi reiterated that the case was still a priority for the department, but without new leads, investigators are limited in what they can do. Becky's family has also worked to keep her case in the public eye. They have participated in missing persons campaigns and have shared her story on social media in the hopes that someone, somewhere, might have information that could lead to a breakthrough. The disappearance of Rebecca Reed is a tragic and perplexing case that has left her family and the Eugene community searching for answers for over 2 decades. The composite sketch of her abductor and the description of the truck he was driving are the only clues that remain, but they have not been enough to solve the case. But if you have any information about Rebecca Reed's disappearance, please contact the Eugene Police Department at 541-682-5111. Her case number is 97 to 1923. Domingo Ramirez, a 21-year-old man from Cave Junction, Oregon, was last seen on the morning of June 5, 2004, as he left his home at the 200 block of Junction Avenue. Ramirez had planned a day trip to Kelly Lake, which is located within the Siskiyou Wilderness, just across the California border. He never returned, and he has never been heard from again. His disappearance, marked by a chilling series of events, remains unsolved to this day. Domingo Ramirez had a quiet and simple life, and his disappearance seemed like an ordinary plan gone awry at first. He was an outdoorsman and enjoyed hiking and exploring the wilderness around his home. Kelly Lake, nestled within the Siskiyou Mountains, was a familiar spot for him, a place of solitude and natural beauty. Ramirez left his residence early that day, accompanied by his loyal pit bull, Candy, a 3-year-old brindle-colored dog that he cherished deeply. It seemed like an innocent trip. Ramirez didn't mention anything unusual or troubling, and he left behind no indications of any pending danger. But when he failed to return by evening, friends and family grew concerned. By June 6th, his family had contacted authorities, and an official search was initiated, though it would soon turn into a case far more complicated and ominous than anyone could have imagined. Almost a week after Domingo's disappearance, a shocking discovery was made. On June 11th, 2004, Ramirez's dog, Candy, was found in Page Mountain Park, located some distance from where Ramirez had last been seen. The dog, injured but alive, was in a state of severe distress. Candy had been shot twice in the head with a .22 caliber firearm. Her injuries were horrendous, but incredibly, she had survived the attack. Her leg and paw had also been wounded, and the extent of her injuries suggested that whoever had harmed her had done so deliberately and with cruelty. However, despite Candy's survival, there was no sign of Ramirez at the scene. His whereabouts remained a complete mystery. Authorities collected the dog and began piecing together the troubling circumstances surrounding her injuries. But the larger question loomed: where was Domingo Ramirez? The absence of his body, possessions, or any clear evidence of foul play made his disappearance even more puzzling. Ramirez's vehicle, a 1997 dark green Oldsmobile Bravada SUV with Oregon license plate number VHW for 91, was also missing when he disappeared. It wasn't until July 2004, over a month after he vanished, that the vehicle was found in Klamath Falls, Oregon. The SUV was located under suspicious circumstances, and investigators quickly zeroed in on the man driving the car at the time. The driver, later identified as Juan Miguel Ramon Soto, was arrested, though his connection to Domingo Ramirez's disappearance remained unclear. Soto's arrest brought more questions than answers. How did he come to be in possession of Ramirez's vehicle, and was he involved in any way with the disappearance? Despite his arrest, the case remained unsolved, and authorities continued their search for leads. As the investigation continued, authorities began to identify 2 individuals as persons of interest in the case: Jose Luis Villegas Cavada and Joel Brian Rico Roscoe. Both men had been in the Happy Camp, California area around the time of Ramirez's disappearance, and both were driving a white 1996 Chevrolet Monte Carlo with Orgeon plates. The appearance of these two men raised more questions, and the authorities began to focus on them as potentially crucial witnesses or even suspects in the case. Despite efforts to locate them, Villegas Cavada and Rico Orozco remained elusive. The investigation was beginning to point toward the possibility that Ramirez's disappearance was not a simple case of someone getting lost or wandering off into the wilderness. There were other, more sinister factors at play. In 2006, the investigation took a dramatic turn. Authorities announced that they had found evidence related to Domingo Ramirez's disappearance in an unspecified foreign country. The significance of this evidence was not fully disclosed to the public, but it strongly suggested that Domingo's fate was tied to something far larger than anyone had imagined. The possibility that he had been kidnapped and murdered seemed more and more likely. Further investigation revealed that some of the evidence had been located on Native American reservation land in Northern California. This led authorities to believe that Ramirez may have been taken across state lines, potentially involved in an illegal or criminal act that led to his death. But no body was found, and no one could confirm the exact events that had transpired in the days after he left his home. The authorities have yet to determine with certainty what happened to Domingo Ramirez. It is believed by many that he may have been the victim of a targeted crime, possibly involving one or both of the men of interest, Villegas Cavada and Rico Orozco. However, the lack of a body, the absence of definitive evidence, and the uncertainty surrounding the circumstances of his disappearance make it difficult to pin down any specific theory. There are several possible scenarios. One theory suggests that Ramirez was ambushed by the two men, who may have had a premeditated motive for harming him. The discovery of his dog, Candy, shot in the head, points to a violent altercation, and the question remains whether Ramirez was physically harmed or even killed during this encounter. Alternatively, the discovery of the evidence in a foreign country could indicate that Ramirez had been taken across state lines or even out of the country altogether, possibly as part of a larger criminal operation. Given the presence of two suspects and the possibility of a kidnapping, there may be more to this case than initially meets the eye. Authorities have not ruled out the possibility that Domingo Ramirez's disappearance could be linked to organized crime or a case of mistaken identity. Despite the passing of years, Domingo Ramirez's case remains unsolved. The mystery of his disappearance, combined with the brutal injury to his dog, Candy, has left his family and friends searching for answers. They continue to hold out hope that one day, the truth will emerge and justice will be served. The men of interest, Villegas Cavada and Rico Orozco, are still sought for questioning. They may hold the key to understanding what happened to Domingo Ramirez, but until their whereabouts are known, the mystery continues. Authorities have yet to uncover the full truth behind this perplexing case, and until then, Domingo's disappearance remains an unsolved crime that continues to haunt those who knew him. If you have any information about Domingo Ramirez's disappearance, please contact the Oregon State Police or your local authorities.